Jim Berg, and my mother was born and lived in the house that they are going to talk about. And so my grandfather helped build it, and so we know a lot about it. We've been in it, and it's a house that used to go in and out without ever knocking, but now we try to knock once in a while because other people own it. So that's careful. And Jerry and Judy have come to our area. Relatively new. They've only been here in the county 50 years, so they are relatively new. But to us old timers, they have done a really good job. They have taken that old homestead, which had been rented for a number of years, and have restored it to maybe even better than when the Bergs owned it. I don't know. It's pretty sharp the way it is right now, and I would like to honor them by saying how much we as a family appreciate them loving the house as much as we have loved it. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Judy and Jerry Toon.
Oh, boy. Okay, I'm Jerry, and this is my wife, Judy. And as far as that house goes, it's going to be kind of hard for me to stand up here and be an expert on it when I got this guy sitting right next to me. He knows all the details. And like he mentioned, we're kind of newcomers because, well, we've lived in the house for like 17 or 18 years, and Dave and Alice Wiggins had that before us, and they did a lot of work on that house to bring it back. Dave did a lot of the structural work on what we're going to call the new house. Unfortunately, during that time, the old original house got torn down, and I was, I don't know, the kind of people that we are, I would like to have had a crack at that, to try to restore it, maybe just a shell or something, because we do like these old houses. We've had a couple of old houses that we restored before we came out here in Bellingham. In the Eldridge neighborhood, we had the Charles Cissna house that we did, and I had that on tour and whatnot like that, and so this is something we like to do. And we were actually pretty comfortable living in Bellingham, and then Judy saw this house out here.
It's my fault.
And she came home and told me about it. Oh, that's great. I didn't think anything of it. I never thought about moving. And she's not a nagger. So it came up again, this house. And then so her and our daughter went out and looked at it. And so finally I got the message, she's interested in this house. So I called Pete Matheson at the lumberyard because we're good friends with him. And he said, well, you know who's living in that house? That's Dave Wiggins. Oh, okay. So we called up Dave Wiggins, and so anyway, we ended up moving into the house. But anyway, we've really enjoyed it. We love it being out here in Everson. We were county people anyway. Our kids all went to school in Meridian, and but when they were going to high school, well, we had Marty Matheson and
Chris
Knopf and Scott, what's his name?
Gelwick.
Scott Gelwick.
Yeah.
They were part of we had a band in the house, and anyway, so we had that link with Everson, a long time back.
Yeah.
It was Pete Matheson and Earl living out here, and the Sweaties lived out here, and we just knew quite a few people anyway, but as far as Everson goes, but anyway, that's kind of a background on us. We got this house, and like I say, Dave Wiggins had done some structural work on it, so we went and did some more. We just more or less upgrades. But what we do when we have these old houses, we like to keep them as original as possible. The house, in talking to Jim here, had several modifications on it along the way, but we didn't move any walls or do anything like that. But the barn was on there. That was another structure. Now that really needed some work. We had to figure out if that would be torn down or repaired, and we decided to repair it. We jacked it up and did this and that, and had a wood floor in it. Had to tear that all out because that was just gone. So, but anyway, we've got that standing, so it looks fairly good now. But the main thing is that this Tuxedo deal had the post office there, going way back to 1884. And when it was a post office, and I guess that must have had a Washington Territories address. Washington wasn't a state until 1889. But anyway, let me show you a picture. Well, here it is on here. Let me know, John, if there's a glare on that.
I think we're all right. Let me zoom in.
But anyway, that's the old house. That's the original house. And that was built, as I understood, in 1884. And that's where a post office reigned for some years. And it was Samuel and Priscilla Berg that were the owners of that. And, in this picture here, have you still got that?
Yeah.
This is the Sumas River on the map. We call it the Sumas Creek going through there. But on the back of this original picture, it said the water level is high because that creek was dammed up where it goes underneath the South Pass Road. And for the mill, there was a Tuxedo mill out in front of that property and to the west, this way from where the house was located. And it was they did logs and cut it into lumber, and then they also did shingles, I guess, there, from what I can tell. And there was also, I see it was a grist mill, so they did all kinds of stuff there. And I don't know too much about the mill, other than that we do have a picture of it. But anyway, they could put logs in this water and float those logs up to the Tuxedo mill. So anyway, it's a real interesting area. And
Do you want me to get the picture?
yeah,
up?
if you would take that book. And you'll note that I got some note cards here. If I don't have that, I'll get off track or forget something. But anyway,
Can you see that, John?
Yeah, let me zoom in.
yeah, that's a rendering of the old original house. And I was going to talk a little bit about how that was built. If I can get out of here, I'm going to have to disrupt this thing a little bit. But, oops. The house was torn down. Oops. The original old house was torn down, but this is a section of floor joist that's out of that. And there's a pile of building materials that was left over from when they tore the house down. And so anyway, I salvaged this, and I went out and cut this off. And it's kind of hard to see, but, well, here, let me show it to you anyway. If I can do this. Excuse the clumsiness, but that's all. The whole house seemed to be built out of cedar. And that's my saw cut that I did there. And as you can see, that cedar hasn't been cared for a long time, but it's still nice, clean, fresh, non-deteriorated wood. But you can see that was hand split, and it was hand split into lengths of 16 to 18 feet for the floor joist, I'm thinking. Here's the original nails that they used in that. They put the subfloor on. Here's a shim to kind of level it out a little bit. But these are the old square head nails that we see. And you can see when they hand split this, the uniformity in width isn't really all there. But it did the job, and I'm sure that old house was just fine. And another thing, just to kind of see there, this is the outside of the log. But when you see the amount of radius, that would have been a big log that came out of. Somebody's hand split that, and probably with a maul and a series of wedges. And my dad was this kind of a guy, and I've seen him hand split this cedar like for fence posts and stuff, like 6 and 8 foot lengths. But you start your wedge in one end, and then you just keep putting wedges in and pounding them in, and with this cedar, it'll just kind of split down there and eventually pop right out. But the whole bottom floor system, it looks to me, as far as I can tell, was built this way. Would you hand me that little piece?
One thing to point out is most of these cedar trees were dead, and so they split really easily.
Okay.
It didn't take much wedge work to split an 18-foot split. I still have my Uncle Dave's fro, and I split a lot of shakes out of scraps that were people when they made shape blocks. You take the old fro and hit it once, and bam, it split 3 feet. down.
When it's old and nice and dry, it does split nice. And the absence of knots is the other thing that makes it split nice. If there's a lot of knots in it, it makes it a lot tougher to split. But anyway, here's some of the framework. This is a 2x6, and if you held up a 2x6 today, this is quite a bit bigger. This is a full 6 inches, and it's a full 2 inches wide. But if you measure this out, it's got a little taper to it. This is rough sawn, didn't go through a planer. It's a little wider down here than it is up here, but it still makes a great piece of lumber to work with. And I can't tell, but you can see there's some deterioration here.
Mm-hmm.
It looks to me like, I don't think that's the bark. That bark would be gone, but I think that's probably a little layer of the sapwood, and then this is the heartwood in here. And I think that, what do you think, Jim?
Yeah. Could be, or it could be deteriorated.
Yeah, I think, it's deteriorated. I don't think it's bark. I
But
think
it didn't deteriorate all that. You're right, it's probably a softer outside wood.
Yeah, but anyway, that wood is over, 120 years old. And it's been laying out in the field for 20 years, in a pile. And anyway, cedar will do the job on that old growth cedar. It's amazing how that'll last.
You know the story on the square nails is they're split two different ways. So the bigger side, when it goes through, will break the grain of the thing. So whenever the bigger part of the nail comes through, it won't split the thing. It'll split the grain going down, and then so that the outside stays the same all the way up, but the other width goes like this.
Oh, okay.
On the nail.
Oh, that's
Okay.
interesting.
There's where it was driven.
Otherwise, you use regular nails in cedar, and it'll split it.
Anyway, I think
You need the square nails don't split the cedar.
we were talking about that. I can put this away.
I never even knew that lumber existed.
It's still out there somewhere.
I'm a lumberman. I
You know how long it's
retrieved
been
it
there,
and stacked it.
Larry? Alan probably took it down, didn't he? Yeah,
Who did?
Uncle Alan. So that'd probably be in the 50s, early 60s.
Oh, is that long back?
Yeah, he'd
Okay.
probably been there a half century,
Okay.
not 20 years.
Okay, because I understood that was.
No, the
Okay.
cedar doesn't deteriorate as long as it can dry out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's been out, just laying out in the open all this time. All this time.
Now, do you want a picture of the mill?
Oh yeah, if you got that. Here is a picture of the Kale Moultrie Mill, and that was just up at the end of our driveway to the west, along the South Pass Road. And the neighbors who lived there, what was their names again?
Barbara?
Vavra.
Vavra.
I always forget that. Anyway, we talked to Vavras, who lived right next door to us when we first moved out there, and they found cable and things left over from the mill in their yard when they do some digging. So there still remains of that, but that's about all we can see. I don't see any footings or any other trace of the mill that I know of there. But that was the mill.
The sad story on the mill is that C.S., who is also my great-grandfather, was sawing lumber along with his crew and shipping it out by rail, because now we had rail in Nooksack, for 6 months before he realized that the people on the other end were not going to be sending money back. That was 1893. The Panic of 1893. They accepted the lumber, they used the lumber, but they forgot to pay for it.
Oh boy.
And so one day he told his crew, "It's over, and you're not getting all these chits I've been giving you. They're not going to be honored because there is no money."
Oh, for heaven's sake.
There was one guy in Nooksack that died, never getting over the fact that he worked for 6 months for nothing.
Yeah.
It really broke him as a person to know that he worked so hard and got nothing for it. Of course, Kales and Moultrie lost all their investment too, but anyway. It's a sad. That was 1893. Now we have all kinds of programs to keep people from really getting hurt anymore.
If you're big enough,
Yeah.
be big.
I had a question for you, Jim.
Question.
In that original picture here that we have of the old house, in the background there's all the standing trees without foliage. And it looks like there's been a fire go through there.
There have been several fires. The big one was in 1885, February of 1885. But most of these trees were dead before that. But the trees the fires tended to move fast, and they went across the tops of the trees. Didn't burn the people on the ground, but burned the trees down and killed the trees. And so most of the cedars in this country were dead before
Oh, I
we
see.
got
Okay,
here.
so this might have been a typical.
This was typical.
Okay.
You look at a lot of the old scenes, and there's lots of dead cedars standing. That's why it was so nice for shingle mills.
Yeah, no,
There were 40 shingle mills in this county at one time, and that's what they were doing, cutting down those dead snags and cutting them up and making shingles out of them and shipping them all over the world.
Do you think that would explain why they may have built that old house out of cedar?
Oh, we built everything out of cedar.
Look at all the wood sitting right behind the house, and it's all, like Jim said, it's all dry.
The house that,
Dead
the house
and dry,
that
ready
I
to
grew up
split.
in was built of all cedar, and it was built in 1920. It was everything in it cedar. The interior walls, the outside walls, the studs. It's built on round cedar logs. They're about 12 inches.
Right. Yeah.
They weren't split like that. It wasn't nice stuff like that. They were round.
I wonder if that's what the foundation would have been on the original house.
Probably
logs.
was. Yeah, I
Cedar
can't remember
logs.
what Dave said on that, but
Okay.
yeah, originally they just cut a log that was about the right size, put it down on and the uprights, the thing that was holding the log up, were logs stuck in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
There was no, as a matter of fact, I got a dryer up there that's built in 33 probably. It's still supported by the cedar cedar posts stick in the ground.
No concrete footing and
No
foundation.
concrete footing, no nothing. They're just stuck in the ground, and the logs are put on top, and a building's put on top of that.
Oh boy. Okay. But the house had the post office, and was that post office like take up one room of the?
It was a
House
closet
or-
in the middle of the house.
I see. Okay.
It was like wasn't a walk-in closet either. It was just about, what'd you say, 3-4 feet wide and 3 or 4 feet deep. That was the post office.
Mm-hmm.
I have the postal records yet, so I know exactly what kind of business they were doing. So,
How many people lived here then?
there were all kind of people. They were all homesteaders, though. They're sort of quarter mile. The reason they had my great-grandpa started the post office was because these people got mail, but they had to go to the crossing to get the mail. The only mail drop was at the crossing, and which was 2 miles from our house, and people further out it was 3 or 4 miles. You didn't walk 3 or 4 miles very often because you didn't get mail very often. And the guy who delivered the mail dropped at Everson, at this crossing, and then he went on up to Gira. Well, he had to go right by our house to do it, or the house they were living in, to do it. So great-grandpa said, I'm going to start a post office, and he started Tuxedo, and so he got all the mail that was coming to the settlers in the general area there, so they came to his house to get the mail and buy stamps and all that sort of stuff. I think he maybe sold, they were penny stamps, but I think a big month would be $30 for the stamps. So, excuse me, I didn't need
No,
to.
no, I just.
And then the post office closed when great-grandpa died in 1890.
Excuse me for a question.
They moved it back to the crossing. Yes.
For me watching like Western movies, American movies.
I'm sorry,
I said from me watching movies, they always used to go everywhere on horseback. Why couldn't he take the mail on a horse instead of walking all the time?
yeah, it was always on, there was nothing but the horse trails. There were no roads. The roads were, they couldn't get across the river for first place. Even when they started hauling, even when they built the Telegraph Road, they only built it to the south side of the river. So the freight came out and it was dumped on the south side of the river. And then you had to figure out a way to get it across. And until 1890 when the railroad built a bridge across. And then they started using that as a bridge for horses and stuff like that over the trucks. But the railroad didn't like that. It was their bridge for their railroad. They didn't like people walking across the bridge. So they had to build a highway bridge. But they didn't build that till after another 10 years before they got the highway bridge going. So they just put planks down, planks for the horses to walk on, but the wheels of the wagons went down the rut. Boom, 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 across the trestles. There's a question way back there.
What about the ferry?
I'm going to have to get up and get back.
The ferry.
The ferry.
The ferry? The ferry was a canoe ferry.
Oh.
The original ferry was a canoe ferry, and Hampton ran it. And when Hampton drowned, Dave Harkness, the guy was living with him, took over, and then they shortly thereafter they put a cable across, and ran a barge on the cable. And do we have a picture? Yeah, it's over there. Took one horse and a rig. It would take the horse and the wagon, and the current would swing it across. By that time, there were 3 ferries. There was one at Linden, and one at Ferndale, and one up here. Then eventually there was one at Nugent's
across
Corner.
by hand then, on the table, with a wooden block kind of thing? If you
Wooden
pull-
block?
Like a block
Would
of
they-
tackle.
Pull
They-
it across by hand then?
No, the current would pull the thing, and they would just slide down the cable.
Ooh, they're so clever.
They used the current to pull it across.
Oh
But
boy.
what
You
about
can only
going back
go
across?
Yeah, go both ways. I don't. Don't ask me.
It's great when you're going downstream.
There'd be some Armstrong power.
But you get a current going, and you just turn the rudder right, and the thing keeps moving. It's sort of like a wind sailing ship. The wind's blowing one direction, but you can get it to go around in all kinds of ways by shuttering and the way shifting the sail. Well, they did that with whatever they did.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have any kind of motorized pulling and shoving, only the current.
Well, when they had this place as a post office, they had to know everybody then because people would come to there to pick up the mail.
Yeah, they knew everybody.
And I'm just wondering is there any idea how many people were in that community at that time in the early days in the 1880s?
I could probably add them all up. I know who was here, but I've never done
More or
that.
less. 30 or 100? More or less. Can you give us a more or less?
Ballpark.
Yeah.
Oh, you figure there were maybe 4 families per section, because the 160-acre homesteads, families were probably 4 to 6 people normally. And well, there were a lot of bachelors. At this time, they were probably all bachelors. There weren't many women around yet. When one family upriver, they had 7 daughters. You can imagine whenever they got to be of age,
Probably a trail going up there, huh?
that family, you go up and down this river and you're going to find most everybody has some kind of relationship to those 7 daughters. They were very, very he was a very good man to have the daughters.
Well, for the people in there, I mean, did they kind of feel like a community there and then
Oh, yeah.
identify with Tuxedo and were there social events or anything like that for the?
Well, not
for
in
the
those
area?
days. Everybody worked too hard.
Yeah,
There
okay.
was no social. You didn't do social till maybe the 90s before you started seeing much
Okay.
social activity.
Mhm.
The churches would be the only social gathering places anyway. The
Okay.
school.
What was close around there was for churches.
The what?
What was available for churches back at that time?
Well, Nooksack had 2, the Advent Christian and the Methodist, and the Presbyterian Church was there originally, but then the Presbyterians decided they had one in Everson and one in Nooksack, and they decided they didn't need the one in Nooksack, so they sold that one to the Methodists and centered in Everson, and Everson had just the Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
That was the only church in Everson.
Mm-hmm. While all this was happening, how'd that relate to like Everson and Nooksack? I mean, were there a semblance of a town in Everson in 1880?
No, there wasn't a
84?
semblance of town. Everson became a town in 28. There had to be 300 people to justify calling yourself a town, to incorporate. And Everson didn't get 300 people till 28.
Oh, really?
Nooksack got there 312. So Nooksack was the big town.
Was that because
But
of the
Sumas was
railroad?
bigger than that because it was where all the railroads came together in 1890.
Was that because of the railroad, do you think, that Nooksack got
That's
a
the
head
only
start?
reason Nooksack's there.
Yeah, okay.
The railroad built Nooksack. The railroad came in, back up. In order to, when they started taking people on the train, the people got off at night. So the towns, there were towns 1 day's trip apart. Well, Nooksack is 1 day's trip out of Seattle. So they built a hotel in Nooksack solely to take off passengers for the night. And they bought Hauser's Homestead and platted it as the town of Nooksack. And they owned the whole town. They became Nooksack Valley Building Improvement Association. They owned the whole town. Everson was Mr. Everson, owner of his own homestead, and then he started to subdivide it, sell little pieces to some of these people that didn't have homesteads, they came in one little piece of land, he'd sell a little piece of land and built a house on it.
I read someplace that Everson, that his name had been misspelled. It was Iverson. Is
That's
that correct? Is that the right?
The family name is Iverson.
Yeah.
But when he got to Nooksack, when he got to Ellis Island, he said, "My name is Eber Everson, not Ivor Iverson." We would say Ivor Iverson, but he said it was Eber Everson, so it's spelled E-V-E-R, E-V-E-R. But his heirs and the ones who owned the property after he died were Iversons. So the Iversons around here are Everson's blood relatives.
The account that I read was that this Iverson that was renamed Everson, he was glad to be in the United States and or in at least Washington Territory or whatever it was at that time, but he was willing to go along with Everson. He didn't try to correct it. That was a story that I heard.
Oh, there are a lot of name changes. A lot of people changed their names here.
Yeah, you got a question back here, Jim.
What's the story behind Tuxedo? I've always wondered why it was called Tuxedo.
Well, check me if I'm wrong, Larry, but the way the family lore story is that my great-grandpa Sam, when he started the post office, remembered a place in Pennsylvania that he knew was named Tuxedo, and he liked that name.
New York.
No, he said Pennsylvania.
Really?
He's from
Just
Pennsylvania.
Tuxedo, New York.
But we have searched all of Pennsylvania, and there is no Tuxedo that we've ever known. But there may have been, like this, a small community that has now ceased to exist or ceased to have gone on. Anyway, that's the family story.
Mm-hmm. If they were...
That was his great-grandfather Sam Berg decided he liked the name Tuxedo, and it was a name he heard in Pennsylvania, and he brought it out here, and he named his post office that. Now you had a question back here.
I had a question, but ever since I've lived here, I've been curious about the name of Everson, which is, as you said, actually...
Well, Everson didn't name Everson.
No, it's Everson.
The railroad named Everson.
Oh.
Because they built the train station on Everson's homestead, and they put a big sign up that said Everson. That's where it got his name.
Everson, when it should have been Everson. So I wondered about that.
And
I thought that the whole
they did the
town-
same thing in Nooksack. They put a big sign on the station that said Nooksack. So that's the way the town's got their name.
Well, because
The railroad did it.
is really foreign sounding to the town, and I thought it should be Nooksack Crossing. That would have been a wonderful name for this town.
Well, you got
But
it's
Everson
you got
was,
to speak. It's Norwegian, you know. Norwegians don't talk like we talk. They talk different. And he said, "Eva, Iverson," you know. You got to talk like a Norwegian to know what they talk.
I can't talk like that Norwegian.
I didn't either, but my wife's Norwegian, and I went to Norway,
you-
so I learned to talk like a Norwegian.
You've been taught. But do you think that Everson or Nooksack with the railroad, was that the demise of Tuxedo, do you think? Because Tuxedo's, it looks to me like Everson had the railroad
Nooksack,
and
yeah.
the bridge and
When Nooksack came into existence, Tuxedo lost its importance.
right. Mm-hmm.
Before Nooksack, Tuxedo was the only place name around. There was Gira, which is now Sumas, which Gira was actually south of that, where we got Damtown. That's where Gira was. And then there was Tuxedo, and then there was the Crossing. Those were the three: Crossing, Tuxedo, Gira.
Mm-hmm.
Now nobody knows any of them.
No.
None of them exist anymore. So, but you look on the old documents now, you'll see Crossing, Tuxedo, and Gira.
Okay, I hadn't run into that.
So, I had a
Well,
question
yeah.
about your house.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Does the house have a basement?
Hmm?
Does the house have a basement?
No,
Did it
Our
ever-
house?
Yeah, your house.
No.
No.
we don't build basements here. We got water problems.
Well, I was
We
thinking.
got a high water table.
The Swift Creek is right there.
If you build a basement, it's going to be full of water in the winter,
Right.
unless you pump it.
Let's get the house.
What was the? Well, we're talking about the new house now.
Mm-hmm.
There was a building right behind the house, the main house. It was like a fruit cellar underneath that.
Yep.
Okay, was that? What
It
was
was
that
the
building?
fruit cellar was that was a 2-story building, but the fruit cellar was only halfway down.
Right, yeah.
And so you had to go up to the first floor, the floor above. That was just food storage.
Mm-hmm.
And a woodshed was behind it, on the other side of that.
Mhm. Okay.
There's the new house, built 1911.
Yeah, with family here. And yeah, this,
That's the one that's hanging right up there.
yeah, we'd heard that the house was built in 1910, but actually it's 1911.
Yeah.
And that makes it.
Well, it was started in 1910 and finished in 1911.
Okay,
The-
because the whole family's there except for Charlotte Robar, or Charlotte Berg at that time.
Well, Charlotte's there, but she's inside that
Okay,
lady.
we were wondering about that.
You just can't see her. She's inside.
But the family, along with Samuel and Priscilla, evidently were at this time were still just before the house was built. Were living in the old house, the original house. And so Charlotte, her story was that this was Charlotte's house. She said this house was built for me. So because the other girls were, and Percy were born back, at the old house. So, but anyway, that was Charlotte's story. And I don't know the dates on these, but here is another picture of that, and it's showing this first picture we had here. Must have been in wintertime. There was no leaves on this walnut tree. Mm-hmm. Now this is the size of that walnut tree, and back in, I don't know when that picture would have been taken, but it's probably pretty close to when it was a nude house, don't you think, Jim? But anyway, I like this because if you look real close, there's an American flag pasted right on the front of that. And I heard a story about the 4th of July from this bunch, and that I think it was Jake Berg set off a dynamite charge.
Well, yeah,
For the
it
4th
wasn't
of
the
July?
4th of July. It was a victory over Europe and
VE
into
Day.
World War One.
Oh, okay.
1918.
Okay, so
So
Armistice
that was
Day.
Samuel Berg.
And he put a stick of dynamite on a stick and set it off. Well, he didn't estimate the concussion force of it. He blew out the bay window. The floor was not happy at all.
What about him?
Why? Those people were all powder monkeys. He was plenty far back. He wasn't hurt, but he didn't understand that it might blow out the windows. You found that out. I think if he did it again, he would have been much further away.
Probably so. But I don't know. It hasn't been really.
Well, it was pretty close to bank there, you see. If he'd have set it off much further, he'd been down at the creek. So he had to set it at the top.
How many flags, how many stars on the flag?
It's hard to
Well,
say.
that's pretty hard to tell that.
But in 1917,
Yeah, if it would be 1917 or 1918.
18.
19. We went over
19.
1917. and
Yeah,
the
1918.
Armistice Day was November of 18.
18.
And oh, that's a great story. But you know, how long has it been since you could buy dynamite at the hardware store? I've got a set of mud flaps at home. It says powder sales, and that's hardware sales now. And but I don't know. That would have been like in the '60s. You could buy the dynamite
Yeah.
at go down to the hardware store. Hardware sales. You can get anything at hardware sales. It was like that in the '60s.
But everybody had stumps, and they had to get rid of them. And dynamite was everybody blew stumps.
It was just a tool.
Even up. When was Alan hurt? 48. When Alan blew his, I got his head pushed into the stump. So everybody blowing stumps in the late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get the water tower. If you person, now Larry Mady just spotted this the other night. I'd looked at this thing many a times, this picture, but I don't think John, you're gonna be able to pick that up. But a sharp eye, where is it now?
Is it in that picture?
Yeah, right here. There's another roof line, just barely peeking above that roof line there, but there was a water tower built behind this house, and I don't know. Is there a date or a timeline on that water tower when that came to be?
Well, I think that house, water tower was there in 11, wasn't it? When it was when they put the bath in anyway. Now the bath wasn't there in the original building, but when they put a bath in, that's when they built the water tower. And we had running water. We had gravity feed water from that water tower. But Uncle Grandpa remembers it had a pitcher pump up there, so he'd climb the ladder and get up there in the tower and pump until the tank was full, and then he didn't have to pump for a couple of days. Then he'd go back up and pump.
Jim and I were talking out in the parking lot, and we decided that with 4 girls in the house, there probably wasn't 20-minute showers.
They were baths. We didn't have
Baths
showers.
at that time.
And the bath was for more than one person.
Anyway, this picture right here, it's a small picture, but with the magnifying glass, you get a real nice view of that water tower behind the house over here. But it's kind of small. I don't think it's going to show up there. But and evidently this is the young Jake Berg, right?
Well, I don't know how young he is, but that was your chick.
Well, he wouldn't be. He wouldn't be
He
this.
smashed, when he was 28 when he smashed his hip. I think he was 28 when he smashed his hip. He's got a cane there, so it's after that.
Oh yeah, he does have a cane.
So he was past 28.
How did that happen? How did he break his hip?
Oh, he was pulling stumps. And his horse was pulling the stump, and the stump was coming out, but unfortunately, the pulley came loose from the end of the string, and the pulley went flying, and it hit him in the pelvis, and shattered his pelvis. And he laid in the field until some school kids found him. And then they strapped him to a board and left him in the house for 6 months. The neighbors did all the work, and 6 months later he got out and went to work. He broke that same hip years later when he fell off a hay wagon. The third time he broke it, nobody fixed it, and he died. He made everybody promise, don't you dare touch that the next time I went out of here. In Christmas of '59, he broke his hip again. Fortunately, my sister, who's a nurse, was here, so she could give him morphine to keep it from hurting. But he wanted to die, and he was 89, and he didn't care to prolong the thing. But he was crippled all the time we ever knew him.
I wanted to go back to this original house. The original house had a full front porch. That was gone by the time we got there. And and there's a couple dormers added back here. But other than that, the house actually still is pretty true to the way it has been. And
Well, this part of the porch is there. Just this part's the only part's taken off, isn't it?
yeah, the front part.
Yeah, just this very front part.
The front part. But it's something that when Jim and I were talking this just before we came in here, found out something I had no idea of before, that the original house, how should I say this? There was a little, like a one room downstairs, one room upstairs.
When Mom was living there, before they built this part, the big 2-story part of it, it was a 2-room affair. It was one living room downstairs and a sleeping room upstairs, and that became the kitchen part of the main house. So the new part was all but the kitchen area. The kitchen area was the old house. And Dave said when you got under there, you could see the difference in the construction in those 10 years between, well, probably Grandpa built the old part and the new was built by a professional. So,
But they moved that.
Yeah, they moved it. It was over by the cherry tree down south of the old house, and then they moved it.
They
At least
moved
that's
that,
what Mom says.
Yeah, to the present location, and then they built the new.
You know how they moved them in those days?
I probably skidded them.
Put a series of logs down, put it on top of the logs, and drug it over, and then when that log behind got it, moved
bring
it
it
around to the front, and horses kept pulling until they quit moving logs. Simple. All the materials are there.
So do people go to the front door of that house, or the back door?
Hmm?
Do people go to the front door or the back door to visit?
What am I looking for?
Today
Nobody ever
or
went in the front
before?
door. I don't ever remember anybody going in the front door of the house.
Never.
I don't ever remember it being open. Do you?
There was a closet just inside the door,
Right.
and it was always so full, you couldn't get out the door anyway.
Well, we have maintained that tradition, Larry. Nobody comes in. Actually, one of the things we did, I replaced the door on the front of the house, and that's been several years back. And Judy's sister was here from the East Coast. Anyway, she was here, and I called her and I said, "You come on in. You're going to be the first one through this brand new door." So she did, and she's been the last one through that, other than me when I've gone out and changed the light bulb on the porch. So we just don't use. In fact, we had company over the other night, and they hadn't been out there before, and they knocked at the front door, and
couldn't
just
hear.
missed them totally. So, but anyway, everybody comes in the kitchen.
Is where the main social center was, and there's 2 doors there. There's a front and back door at the kitchen. So why do you need the other one?
Okay, then I have a question to ask about these old houses.
Okay, Edith.
My grandmother lived over on Eldridge area. Now the house that she had a parlor, and that's where all the people went to visit. We sat in the parlor. Now, does that house, did it have a parlor?
Yes, it had a formal living room.
Okay.
It's
Nobody went in the formal living
So
room.
that's just okay. So then
I don't know what the formal living room was for,
It
except
was-
that's where we went to get where the Christmas tree was.
Yeah. Okay. So then that was just that wasn't.
That right?
Wasn't that
That right,
the
Larry?
normal living room
Yeah.
in the parlor?
Yeah.
Parlor, right.
If you were to walk through that front door, like I was talking about, you'd go into a small entry and then into the parlor.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's still
okay.
there.
Can I ask another question? This has
Sure.
been on my mind for years and years and years. I look at these pictures of these old homes. To me, they're always so big. They're huge. Why do they make them so big? You know, with an upstairs and all these rooms.
I think I could comment on that a little bit.
I probably could too.
Oh, you want to comment? Well, you go
Call
ahead.
her mom.
I often
It's
wonder.
children.
Yeah.
They had big families.
Yeah, there's 6 children in the
Yeah,
family.
Larry and Libby had a family reunion. I think it was for Charlotte's 95th birthday, and so we had an open house over at our house. So the Hart sisters were there, and there were a bunch of the family, and they went into our house, and they said, "We thought this was so big." You know, but when you get in there, they're not really all that big. They look imposing and big from the outside, but they're not quite as big, I think, as what, at least from a child's view anyway, that was the girls. Remember that, Judy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she said, we remember this is, you know, just looks so small compared to what we thought it was.
Well, nowadays, houses are built usually on one floor, right?
Well, no,
Not
not really.
necessarily.
Most of them are
Necessarily.
two-story, yeah.
Okay, so then they didn't think of building it just on one story.
Well, the older houses were bigger. You didn't have very many 900,000 square foot houses. The original houses were small. The ones that were built with logs, they were small. They were 10 by 12, 10 by 20. They were small buildings, and everybody was in one room. The beds folded up against the walls, the tables folded up against the walls, so that you'd have room to move around in the middle, because they were hard to heat.
Just an observation. I think one of the reasons people had larger families back in those days was no TV.
No TV.
Well, I always heard it was free labor.
Yeah, that's a lot of it, yeah.
Jerry.
Question.
Jaden looked up on the internet, and in 1912 on, there were 48 states. So that flag's got 48 stars on it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, right, yeah, until. And ask Jaden when it got the 49th and 50th. See if he knows that. Because Alaska and Hawaii, I can't remember when they came in. It was around 1959.
59 was
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Was one Puerto Rico?
there's one thing that I was going to just bring that was kind of interesting to me. Here's a real nice rendering that Wayne Sorensen made of the house, and it's an interesting view. I've never. This is a picture from a side. We don't have any photographs from this angle, but it shows a little difference on the back part of the house. It's not that way now. So there's probably a photo floating around about that from someplace. But anyway, he mentions after that picture, he's got a little write-up here. But the new house was done by, it appears to be a contractor, which is kind of interesting for 1911. But and the contractor's name, I had it written down here, was, well, I can't find it.
Calendar and Johnson.
Calendar, yeah, right. Calendar and Johnson. I don't know if that has any historical bearing or not, but according to Wayne Sorensen, that was who built that new addition on the house. But anyway, there's he's got a little story, a couple of little stories here, and he had well, he talked to Jim on that fireworks story, that dynamite charge, but there was a story in here. There was a. Shall I just read this about the black people? Shall I just read this about the black people?
Sure.
Or do you want to tell it?
Whatever.
And this is Jacob's eldest daughter, Gladys. She says she also remembers an interesting incident which revealed her mother's generosity. And anyway, here's the story. That I knew my mother never turned away anyone who was hungry. And these people lived through the Depression in this house, so there's probably hungry people around. But anyway, that's Gladys, and she said her mother. She said she fed people from all parts of the world, and as a result, none of us was prejudiced on account of race. And my folks had no fear of any stranger. Those are two statements that you could really hang your hat on for this family. But anyway, at one time, a black quartet came to perform at a local church. When my folks found out that these people couldn't find a place to stay in Bellingham, they invited them to stay at our home. And anyway, this Gladys says, it was kind of fun. Gladys said, we asked them to sing for their breakfast, which they willingly did. Now, isn't that a great story?
Yes.
That's really great.
That's nice.
But that's what makes these old things fun. When you hear some stories like that, and you kind of get to the point where you kind of have a feeling. You don't know them firsthand, but it's nice to know that there's people like that around ahead of us. And I suppose Jim probably got all kinds of stories that could come from that. But
Larry does too, don't you, Larry? The Bergs have stories. The Bergs were storytellers.
Were they?
yeah, but they can't tell them all.
And my mother was one of the best, so I had lots of stories. Some of them I've had to verify, and they didn't come out quite the way she remembered them.
Yeah, but that's what makes a story good, you know. Is if it's a good story, you don't only tell it once, and as you tell it along, well, it gets a little better, you know. What do we got here? I wanted to talk about a little bit about that walnut tree.
Okay.
There was a
black walnut.
a black walnut tree
A black walnut.
on the old house. Let's see, this is looking north. So, looking north on this is the original house. The new house would be built up in front of this. And between where that house is built, there was a walnut tree. And here's what that looked like whenever that picture was taken. But anyway, I want to talk about this because by the time we got to the house, that tree was so big that, anyway, it ended up getting taken out. And we really hated to do that. But let me find a picture. Could you find a picture of that? Where it is, but
One of the things we need to say, they were very kind. Charlotte said, "Don't cut that tree down until I die."
we got that message and we were prepared to honor it.
She did not want to see that tree cut down. It had been there for 100 years, and because that's when she died, she was 100. And so that tree had been there 100 years, and she didn't want that tree that house. Well, it doesn't look the same without the tree.
No,
It's much different.
but a black walnut.
Is this the picture you want? This is a little
Yeah,
bit
that's
of
a
the
good
tree.
one. That kind of shows the location.
There's one.
That tree gets to be mighty big. That tree was over 80 feet in diameter. I mean, by the branches area. I can tell because the branches touched the house at the upstairs bedroom window, and there's a garage built back here, and the limbs were enough over the overhang that it would drop black walnuts and they'd roll down the back side of the roof, which isn't all that bad. But the problem is with the garage here, we couldn't use the garage when those black walnuts were falling. They'll dent your car. And I'm a car guy. I like to keep my car decent. I've restored a couple of cars, and I couldn't get them close if they're in the garage. I was afraid to take them out. And on top of that, there's always something falling out of those trees. And black walnut, everybody knows about walnut stain. Well, if you take one of those black walnuts and squish it, the husk on it, you get a kind of a clear liquid on it. And a little while later, your fingers will be black, and that just doesn't come out. Well, that gets on your shoes, and you take it in the house. It was really a hassle. We lost our power to one of the buildings because of the roots. It grew into the septic tank, and it was really causing some problem. I brought an arborist out there, and talked about maybe cutting the roots on that, but anyway, Charlotte herself solved the problem. At that 95th birthday that we were talking about, that Mady's had that family reunion. We had the open house over at our place, and Charlotte took me by the arm and she says, "I want to walk in the back of the property." And so we walked behind the house, backed out towards the old house used to be, and in that area, and we showed her around, and there's still a real nice grove of cedars back there, and we went back about that far, and she told some stories, that she remembered of her childhood. But anyway, on the way back, and she was holding my elbow, my right arm actually, and we got up there behind the garage, and of course this big walnut tree's looming there, and she looked up at that and she said, "You cut down that walnut tree." And I said, I can't remember what I said, but I questioned her on it. Are you sure? And she said, "You cut down that tree." So we had her permission, and anyway, it did end up getting cut down. The tree was in the perfect location for a tree that size. It was 120 years old, and I don't know how tall it was. I know it was over 80 feet. Maybe 90. I don't know, But it was in the perfect location for the old house. But when they built a new house, they built it within 40 feet of that walnut tree. And when Judy showed you that picture of that house taken way back when, it was okay, but where's that rolled up picture? If you could get that.
The rolled up picture?
Yeah. Thought we had one. Anyway, the tree was just out of proportion to everything. But you know, when there was no walnuts falling and the summer was hot, it was a beautiful shade tree.
Did you sell the wood for that?
You know, I
Tree?
did not.
Oh, I
It was going to be so
understand.
expensive to take out. I made a deal with the guy. I got some walnut. And it was kind of like a deal when Jim was talking about the mill that never got paid. Well, I had that with the tree. But because we were supposed to get some furniture made out of that. And I was going to try to surprise the mateys with a desk out of that deal, but it didn't. Sorry, Larry. It didn't come around. It didn't come around. The deal kind of fell through. And but it was such a big tree, it was really hard to take out there. That was a story in itself.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'd like to read the story of the tree, and it will tell you why we had a lot of angst about taking the tree out. This is a story written by a family member that Tabitha Holliday's sister-in-law, Marianne Holliday, brought the nut from Indiana to Minnesota. And it was planted there in 1881. So we got a nut, gets planted in 1881. Now the small tree was brought to Washington in 1883. And then it was set out in place where it was growing in the spring of 1884. Now, how often do you get the history of a tree from a nut?
and a grand old tree like that.
And a beautiful tree. I mean, the history there. And so when Charlotte said, oh, you cannot cut that tree down till I die, we were going to honor that. But then she said, cut that tree down. I was like, okay.
We still did it reluctantly, but we did it.
We did it reluctantly. However, I would like to finish a little more of this story, if it's okay, because my husband took a lot of the nuts that fell from that tree and he planted them, and we had a lot of little starts. And when the Mateys had Charlotte's birthday party, a lot of the family members came to the house, and they took starts home with them. And besides that, Jerry has planted how many?
We got a grove of 10 of those descendant walnut trees. I don't know if you can see them, but here's kind of what they look like now. This is one of the smaller ones. This right alongside is another one, but it's taller. But anyway, we've got 10 starts of those original trees out there. And somebody that won't know anything about me 100 years from now, he's going to love me because he'll be able to put his kids through college with the lumber out of those trees in another 100 years.
Where are they? Where are they?
They're behind the house.
So on the other side of the creek?
Well, okay, if you're standing at the South Pass Road, you look down the driveway, you see our house. Behind that would have been, immediately behind that would have been the walnut tree, and then behind that would have been the original house. And behind that, you know, going further south, there's an area back there. We have a pond back there, and there's a little knoll. And I keep it all mowed, and we've got, anyway, that's where the trees are planted. And they probably are planted over like a half-acre area.
Yes, when did the big black walnut come down? What year?
It would have been 2006, approximately.
Just 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, hey, Larry and Libby, was that, what year was that Charlotte had her, it was, we took the tree down the year after that following summer after her,
95th.
Well, she was born in 11, and
So
it was her 95th anniversary, so it would have been,
Two- 2000.
06.
okay, so it
Yeah.
would have come down in 07 then. Yeah. Yeah,
I have some nuts still left from that tree.
yeah.
Oh, did you hear that?
What was that?
He still has nuts from that tree.
I remember you coming out and getting them, right? Yeah, we had a good time, yeah.
We can make an arrangement.
I was always gonna ask you what you did with those, because those black walnuts, we couldn't figure out what to do with these black walnuts. They're, when they come down, they're about that round, and they're in a husk. And then that husk will kind of rot off, and then you've got the black walnut. It's a little bigger than a golf ball inside, and they're perfectly round. And I'll tell you, to try to crack those things, I couldn't figure out how to do it. And
Do
you
it
can,
with a vice.
okay, yeah, a hammer didn't work, and I talked to several people, and somebody that would, I can't remember who it was, but somebody was familiar with that, and they would get a bunch of these black walnuts and make them, save them for ice cream, and there, you don't get a whole lot of nut out of one of the shells, and you, evidently, well, when you get it, you kind of have to pick out little pieces, and but anyway, what they would do, they would back the vehicle up into the garage with a wall behind it, and then jack it up so the wheel had about that much room, and then they'd roll these nuts, and when that wheel's going around, it'd go bang, and it'd throw that back, and you get the right distance and tolerances. That would be what would break those walnuts. And I said, well, okay, I know how to do it, but I'm not going to do it. So we never did get any production out of the black walnuts.
The interior wall of the black walnut is about.
But I don't know, John, can you get this this guy right here? There's a picture of that walnut slab that's down, and behind the figures there is, where are we here? Here is another log that's down that we're leaning up against. That's kind of the size of that. And this was, I don't know which end that was really, but I measured that tree. I wasn't sure how to measure the diameter of it because it was not perfectly circular. But for circumference, it would go 14 foot 6 inches. And that's standing up and putting your arm out like a tree surveyor would do, like Bert Powell would have done at Great Western when he goes out and measures up your timber. But anyway, breast high, and then that circumference there is what they determine log scale with. And but anyway, that's what so that was that 14 foot 6 inches. Isn't something around the roots or anything? You know, that's right up there at chest high. Mm-hmm. So that was a big tree. And they got two, I can't remember how long these were. I think they were 12 feet, I'm not sure. But they got two of those logs before they ran into the limbs. So it wouldn't have been 12 feet, probably 10 feet. There's probably 20 feet up there. I'll tell you, you talk about a great tree swing for kids. Mm-hmm. Man, oh man, I couldn't get through that with our 20-foot ladder. I had to back the pickup up and put the bed, my 20-foot ladder. Of course, you had to have a little slope, but to get up there to tie that rope onto that big limb. And it was way out from the trunk of the tree so that they could, anyway, it was just a paradise for kids to swing on that. That was the greatest tree swing I've ever run across. But that was...
Until the nuts started falling.
So the inside of the wood is dark also. So
yes.
Black walnut has black wood?
Yes, it actually it would be just about purple. It has a reddish purple. And you can see here there's a white sapwood around the edge of it. And but then this is called the heartwood inside. And to see that much heartwood in a tree, that's an old tree. Normally the heartwood, like in a younger tree, would take up roughly half of the distance. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, when you got into the middle, you know, you're only getting that much heartwood. But anyway, this had a lot of heartwood.
There's actually a black walnut on my property that I don't know where it came from. And there's little saplings around it, but I better watch out. Because it's not in a place where it can get big. I mean.
Well, it will.
It's
yeah, it will.
It just put itself somehow kind of buy a big pine tree, so I'm gonna have to figure out what to do.
We have one on our driveway that we'll have to, but probably somebody else
Yeah, I
down the
should get a
line.
picture of it rearing up my foundation of my house one day or something. Huh. But how would it have just grown in my yard? I mean, where would this seed have come? Oh, the squirrel ran all the way from your house to mine. Or
Yeah,
something?
it's
The crows drop them too.
Yeah.
Well, I have
They drop them.
question on that.
Trying to get them to
My
bust
family
open.
came here probably was 1883, and we have two huge walnuts, black walnuts, on our property too.
Mhm.
I wonder how common that was to actually plant
That
walnuts.
was a very
back
common tree.
then. Yeah,
Most of them had black walnuts and English walnuts.
yeah, we have those too.
Yeah.
yeah, there's English walnuts on this property too. But if I'm going to take the time. I don't have the picture to show this, but here's the way these slabs looked like when it came out. It was cut on an Alaska mill, which is just a great big chainsaw that just goes and moves on a carriage down the log. And but anyway, these guys were out there cutting. There was a crew cutting these slabs off this log, and this James Haddock is the guy that was in charge of that. It was his log. Anyway, he said, "Hey, come over here." And so anyway, I came over. And then everybody was all huddled around looking at the slab here. And in the slab, there was a child's locket, just imprinted. Now, if that saw would have gone 1/8 of an inch higher on that cut, wouldn't have seen it. If it would have gone 1/8 of an inch lower, it would have destroyed it. But the way that cut made, it was just a miracle, I guess. It just shaved enough off so you could see it was a heart-shaped locket, and it was gold, a gold color. And the chain was laid out like that. And how that happened, I don't know. But anyway, it was in the heartwood of the tree. So that must have been left on the tree somehow. And the tree grew around it all these years. And I asked some of the Hart girls, and nobody lost a locket that I found, but somebody did. And I have got that picture, but it's on a hard drive of a computer that I can't boot up. And I tried that before we came here, and I couldn't get it to go. And so I called this guy, because he had a picture of it too. He had the slab with that in it. And he didn't know what he was going to do, but that was a prize. But anyway, I called his number, it discontinued. So anyway, that's a story you just have to believe me on. I don't have the proof to show you. But I sure wish I did, because that was just to go down and look at that slab of wood and had that thing, it just couldn't have been laid out any more perfect. But those are some of the darndest things that can happen. But anyway, that's the black walnut. Did you have something on that?
No, but I want you to talk about the chestnut.
Oh,
And Jim can help us out.
okay,
with the
because
chestnut.
Frank DeFreitas is here. He had a question on the chestnut. He's been over and seen that, but let me get a picture of that out. Got a picture here of I don't know how old this is. It's probably not original to the 1884, but there's a picture of a chestnut, and if this was close enough to the house, you should have seen what we had to drive over to get out of our driveway this morning. Well, Jim was there yesterday. It's twice as bad now because we just cleaned it up this weekend. And what you saw was from Saturday. But anyway, there's these chestnuts. They're a spiked ball about the size of a tennis ball. With all these little spikes, you can hardly pick them up with your hands. And then once they hit the ground, they come open. They deteriorate a little bit. And I think there's probably 3 chestnuts inside of each one.
3 nuts in each one.
And they'll be the size of maybe a silver dollar, maybe a little smaller, and then maybe about that thick. But
usually only one of the 3 is.
And one of them will be nice and large, and the other 2, is that common to chestnuts?
That's common. Sometimes you get 2.
Okay.
But I don't think I've ever gotten 3.
Yeah, okay. I just didn't know if it was a tree or not, but anyway, this is there it is. And Jim, I think that's how I met you. I think you came over to look at that tree.
I mean, pick up your nuts.
Yeah, he was picking the chestnut. So I saw him doing that.
Grandpa's nuts, not yours, nuts anyhow.
Well, I'm going to grab some anyway. So I went ahead and I saw him picking these chestnuts up. So Well, I'm going to do that too. So I picked up these chestnuts and took them in, and I roasted them in the oven, and we got a little stove that's got an ash pan in it, and that gets hot. So I tried that, and I didn't have any luck with those. So someday, if you share the family secret, you can show me how to do something with a chestnut. I never had any luck with the black walnuts and chestnuts.
I haven't had very good luck either, so don't ask me.
But anyway, Jim's got a little story on the tree, because evidently I can't remember the story real well, but it's a unique tree to the area.
Well, the American chestnut is common on the East Coast. It's grown in the wild on the East Coast. Well, the ones out here were all brought out by settlers because it was a major nut that they ate as part of their diet. They ground it up and used it as a flour and things like that. And they got an American chestnut blight on the East Coast and killed all of the American chestnuts on the East Coast, including the wild nut. So they died. But they did not get across the Rockies. And so in Colorado, I think it is. Do you know anything about it, Larry? There's an experimental chestnut farm, I think, where they're trying to reintroduce the American chestnut on the East Coast. Now that all the blight's gone and all the trees are dead, they're trying to reintroduce it. All of them came from nuts from here, because the nuts that came from the West Coast are not subject to trees that were affected by the blight. So there's no genetic, it could be no genetic inheritance. And so my great-uncle Dave was the one that grew them, and then one of the seedlings off the histories, that's one of the seedlings off histories. And so it would have to probably be in the 30s.
Oh, really? Okay.
Before it was planted.
Mm-hmm.
And so we still do have American chestnuts. All of my trees have died. That's why I'm down picking up his trees. So, but it's a traditional, historic American tree. Is the American chestnut, and the only ones that exist are on the West Coast because all the rest have died. And so they're trying to reintroduce it from our stock back there. And they've been doing it for 20, 30 years, but I don't know how successful they are. I've forgotten all about it in recent years, so I don't know. But anyway, this is one tree that's doing very well. It's still quite a young tree. Ours were all older, 20 years older, and they have, all trees have a life expectancy, and the American chestnuts is about 70, 80 years, and then they'll deteriorate and die. Black walnuts are 100 years or so. But even like Doug fir is only 200 years. We talk about old growth trees, they're probably not more than a couple hundred years old because they'd be down. Mm-hmm. They'd deteriorate and go down. Filbert trees, which we've got, is a 40-year life. Yeah, there's a lot. They all have life expectancies, and you get one of those big old cottonwoods, and they're 80 years, and you better stand out of the way of them because they're going to come down, and they're big and heavy. So the American chestnut is. I'm so glad they're keeping that tree because it does create a huge mess, and they're not pleasant to try and pick because if those spurs will. You got to learn to do it with your feet. You open the thing with your feet, and then you can take the nut out. But you can break the burr open with your feet. Put it between your feet and stomp on it. It'll open up, and then the nut will pop out.
But I think I understood that these are kind of scarce around here in the area.
Yes.
Because there's one in
Linden.
And
as far as I know, there's only two in Whatcom County, yours and the one in Linden.
Okay.
Sage, my sister-in-law, has one in her yard.
In Linden, they found they were going to cut down this tree, and then they found out it was American chestnut, so they had to build a school around the tree.
Nice.
Made it more expensive, but they didn't cut down the tree. It's still there.
Sage waters that she's talking about, she knows what to do with them too. She fixes them, and they're delicious to eat.
Oh yeah, you talk about chestnut roasting on the open fire, and in New York,
boiling them,
in New York in the winter, they have these roadside vendors that sell roasted chestnuts.
Well, these are, you can put them in like vegetables. She serves them like vegetables.
Oh yes, yeah, and they're good. They are good. They're not the best nut in the world.
Her tree's probably about 35 years old, I think.
And they have very thin skin, so you're really easy to crack. You don't have to go, not like the black walnut, which you have a hammer and a brick.
And they look good. They're kind of rusty, light brown.
Yeah, they're really nice, and they're nice to the
Yeah, and
feel.
if
They're
you
just
roast
nice and
them,
smooth.
the shell pops open, so
Yeah.
you don't even have to open the shell.
When you come here, you can sit down with a little bowl of chestnuts and work away and.
I just need to be educated. I think the chestnuts are okay. I just couldn't figure it out.
Most of
Anyway.
the chestnuts you buy in the store, though, are from Italy.
Oh, no good.
We don't sell there aren't very many Americans chestnuts sold. There is a new orchard going in on the Hannigan
Hannigan.
chestnut orchard, maybe 2-acre orchard there.
Well,
So
as far as I'm concerned, they're delicious nuts.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. While we're on trees, we've got a tree there that I call our mysterious English walnut. It's down here, and someplace along the line, something happened with this tree where the main trunk is here, and it goes over here, and this is the distance from here to here is 10 feet. And from here to here is 10 feet. That tree is rooted at the main and at each side. The kids love it. We call this the climbing tree. When little kids come out, they're just all over. They just love the tree. And I like it just because it's so unique, but I've never found, I don't think this is an act of nature.
no, it looks like somebody planted
Somebody
it.
has done that, and to take a tree and get it to root out 10 feet, you have to have a tree that's at least 10 or 12 feet high to start off with to do this, wouldn't you?
And bend it down.
That's the way it looks to me anyway. But anyway, I was just wondering if anybody,
I don't know
Larry
anything
or
about
any
it.
of
You know
you
anything
people,
about Larry?
know anything about that.
I don't remember.
Wow, we'll have to do some research, won't we?
Yeah, and this sits right across the driveway from our kitchen window, so
Yeah.
we like the tree. And we've got the creek down there, and every once in a while we've been treated. Have you ever seen a duck fly into a tree? Well, the darndest thing is to see a wood duck, and they're a real beautiful bird anyway. A wood duck come and land right on that tree and look right. Anyway, this has really given us a lot of entertainment. But anyway, okay, I'd
Yeah,
really like to
I know the tree, but I don't know.
No, I've
stories
asked a
on it.
couple of people. Charlotte didn't know about the tree, and so it probably came after that. I don't know how old it is.
Well, no, that tree's older than that,
Okay.
probably.
But somebody has to know about that. Anyway, until that's our mysterious English walnut tree. And it has plenty of walnuts. Okay. While we're on that, here's a picture of what the house looks like today. And it looks pretty darn good considering John Crane out here painted this house. What was it, John, a couple summers ago? But anyway, he painted that,
2015.
and
A year ago.
and the property had got a lot of buildings on it. So anyway, I brought a sprayer and painted the buildings myself. But John did a nice job, just a beautiful job on painting that house, and we're just so pleased with that. And now, what color was that original house?
White.
White.
Everything was white.
And those pictures too?
Hmm?
The pictures that we have here, that was
The
a White
black-
House?
Yeah, everything was white.
Oh, okay.
Like
Okay.
Henry Ford, you know, you can have any car
long as
color
it's
you want as
black.
long as it's black. Well, you can
Okay.
have a house any color you want as long as it's white.
Okay, well,
I don't remember any houses different from white. Do you? The old houses, they were all white. Maybe that's the only color paint they sold. I don't know.
I know the barns are always whitewashed inside.
Well, a lot of the barns were red.
Red on the outside.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
whitewashed on the
Whitewashed
inside.
on the inside.
They hung a lot of things on the wall, so, you know, they
Yeah.
probably didn't paint as much. Maybe they just wanted the background.
Well, the original houses,
painting,
most of them weren't even painted.
you know, on the
The house we had, that we moved into in '44, my Uncle Dave built that in '20. He never painted it.
Yeah.
It was cedar. His old house was painted in 1890, but was never repainted. He
Well, it
painted
looks
red.
like the original house was painted. That appears
It
to
was
be
unpainted.
It
The
was
original house was
unpainted?
unpainted.
Oh, okay, because boy, that sure looks,
It's gray.
because here would be your natural wood color, would think.
No,
But-
cedar grays. Cedar goes to a gray
That's
color.
for sure. It's silver's out. But older pictures that we had in here, it appeared that it had never been painted.
Yeah, it never
You
been
know,
painted.
those.
I forgot. I thought you were talking about this house. This house was painted.
Yeah, that's what that was.
The Hovander house was never painted.
The Hovander house.
Not
What-
painted for a long time.
Yeah.
Many, many years before they put paint on it.
Well, cedar won't ever deteriorate. Once it grays out,
No.
it'll be there forever.
They oiled
As
it.
long as you like gray.
Yeah, here's the old house in a state of disrepair after it got, pretty old, and it appears where that's never been painted.
No, it was never painted. That
Okay,
house.
it's just the light, I guess, in this that makes it look like it's a color. But
When did we start painting houses? Why did we start painting houses?
Well, we stopped using cedar.
Because women want a different color than gray?
Because it cleans the house up. You paint it and it's all fresh and clean.
Like brick houses, they never paint.
Well, they're not fresh and clean.
Stone houses, they never paint. Why do we paint wood houses?
Well, the wood would deteriorate if it wasn't cedar, right?
Hmm?
Wouldn't the wood deteriorate if it wasn't cedar?
No,
So when houses became.
like the house we have built in 1890, it was stained. He used a red stain on it, but it's never had anything. And you go to look at those boards now, and they'll last for another 100 years.
Stain is a preservative.
Easy.
But stain is a preservative.
Hmm?
But stain is a preservative, as is paint.
Yeah, but the stain's all gone. Well, yeah, but I have other buildings that are. Well, look at that log there. Been out in the woods, out in the weather for 50 years. And it doesn't deteriorate at all on the exterior.
keep in mind that's an old growth cedar where it had all those nice natural oils, and second growth cedar just doesn't have that kind of durability.
Doesn't last as long.
We've been in the cedar business for a long time. I'm a lumberman, and we've had operated cedar mill, and just been around cedar a lot. And so naturally, anything that I have to build at home, I build it out of cedar.
Right.
Because and it's scraps that nobody wanted to buy, so I take them home and do something with it. But anyway, you get that old growth cedar. That's the result you have there. It'll last for, I think, just about ever before it deteriorates. But the second growth trees don't have that nice red color, and they have wide growth rings on them, and they will deteriorate. They'll rot out. Anyway, I wanted to ask you.
About the sumacs?
Oh yeah. Yeah, on the map, this is the Sumas River, but it's not much of a river. You can walk right across it. It's we call it the Sumas Creek, and it is referenced as the Sumas Creek. So I don't know what it is officially. Do you know, Jim?
Well, on the old maps, it's called the Sumas River.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it still is when I
Yeah.
see current maps.
Yeah.
But so anyway, whether it's a river or creek, if it's a river, it's a junior-sized river. It's unique, though, because it flows north, and it goes into Canada. But anyway, there is a picture, and I guess this must be Jake, right here.
Yeah.
But here's a string of salmon that came out of that, and I think it's the little creek right behind. But you see all these pictures from these old days of people just yard these salmon out and just. But when you look at these are really not real fat salmon like you'd normally see, and to me, that would look like what they would call a jack salmon.
That is a jack salmon.
Okay, because a jack salmon is a salmon. Well, they spawn in fresh water and then they go out to the salt water. And normally a mature salmon comes back when he comes back to spawn, has been out there 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. A jack salmon is one that comes back to spawn. He's immature. He's capable of spawning, but he's only been out to sea for a year. And that's why come they're so thin. And I thought this was kind of curious because where's that other book?
It's next to
Oh,
Jim.
Jim, would you hand me that book that's right there? Yeah, that one. But would you find that picture? But anyway, there's a picture in there, and it shows a swarm of salmon in the Sumas Creek or Sumas River, whatever they called it. And I don't know if you can get that, but anyway, it's just, you know, you can't see the bottom hardly there. But anyway, the caption reads, read that caption, I can't see it upside down.
Jack salmon spawning in Sumas
Yeah.
Creek in the 1920s.
Yeah. So this is where I have to have something to learn, because I'm a fisherman and I like to go out and fish for these things. And you might occasionally catch a jack salmon, but they're with the other salmon. And why this would be a swarm of jack salmon in Sumas Creek. And then I run across this picture here. That's just about like the mystery of the walnut tree to me.
We can blame Carol Morris for that picture. I brought, when we had the Watching Memories thing, I just brought albums down to Carol, pick out what you want and put it in. And she says, nobody's ever seen it. Well, I've since been around Bellingham since we came out with this book. And there's pictures on walls all over Bellingham, on offices and things. Nobody's ever seen salmon in the creek like that. And I said, well, Mom took that picture.
Uh-huh. Oh, she did?
Yeah, right down there below the house.
Okay.
That picture's taken right down below the house.
Well, believe it or not, I videoed salmon spawning. It's been probably 10 years ago now. But Larry came over with his tractor, and he had a bucket load of gravel. And he said, I've got a little gravel. This Sumas Creek, by the way, is a mud bottom. It's not gravelly, at least in the flat parts. It is when you go across at the Goodman Road, you can see gravel in there, even on the Swift Creek. But where this runs by and goes all the way up, it's pretty well mud. I don't think there's any gravel. And why salmon return there to spawn, I don't know. That's something else I don't know. A lot I don't know.
That's right near where I live, where Goodwin is, and the creek there. They call it Breckenridge Creek.
Okay, well that's a different creek, but that's full of salmon too.
It is. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I saw
Yeah, I've
20
seen those.
salmon
It's all grown up with blackberries now, but if you look over the bridge right there from the Goodman Road, when those blackberries are cleaned out, actually when I saw the salmon that were in Arcade Little Creek, I took a drive down there just out of curiosity, and it looked like that picture that she's got there. They were just swarming. But
and in the ditches, they wind up being in the ditch beside the road.
Yeah, they're
and
all over.
I've seen them this long. I know.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing.
Well, I can tell you one story about jack salmon is
Fraser.
Mom says they used to take a pitchfork and put those things in the garden and plant them. And then they put the corn seed on top of each one of those jack salmon the next spring.
Wow.
Because I had to get rid of them or else they stunk them out. So they got the dead salmon they'd pick up and plant in rows in the field, in the garden, and then the next spring they just put corn seed right on top of every one of those salmon.
Well, I know that Judy's roses like fish heads, but I never heard that about the corn. But I'll tell you one thing about that creek. The kids, of course, like to play in that. And so sometimes grandpas got to get out there, too. That's the coldest darn water that...
It's cold.
I'll tell you, you go out there and you walk in that, at least me anyway, and it's numbing cold. And this is even in the summertime, and the creek is low. You'd think that water would be warmed up a little bit, but it is really cold.
Well, you know, I was told that the Breckenridge Creek was fed, I know that it flows north into the Fraser River.
I don't know about...
It flows into Sumas right at the bridge going up the hill at Nooksack.
Oh.
Okay,
they come together right there.
Because it does. It goes up to the Vetter River first, and then into the Fraser. And when we had this salmon incident, I've got some friends that are real fishermen, you know, so anyway, we had a group come out. They thought, well, they'll go ahead and I don't know what you'd call it, but reconstitute that ground, you know, make that, you know, put some logs in across the river and have it wash some of that silt out of there, because I told them with Larry's gravel in there, these fish wanted to spawn there. And so anyway, they talked about doing that, and anyway, some of them, when they found out they were Canadian salmon, they didn't want to do that. No, some guy told me, those are Canadian salmon. Oh, you know. Anyway, so we didn't get it.
Did they say A?
No, these were Yankees, and they didn't like the idea of that. I guess
Well, they
helping
say the
out
reason
Canadian
was that
salmon.
jack salmon was there is because of Sumas Lake.
Oh, okay, so
They
that
the
is
jack salmon usually require a freshwater lake
right.
to do whatever they do in it, and so they'd come into the lake and spend their year there, and then they'd go up.
So jack salmon is a characteristic of Sumas
Because of Sumas Lake.
Because of Sumas Lake.
But then they drained the lake in
Okay.
24, so now they don't. They go directly into the
Right,
freezer.
okay.
That's why we don't have the multitude of them we used to have in the early days.
Oh, okay.
That other picture of in the creek was taken before the Vedder Canal was built.
Oh, okay.
And before the
Yeah.
before the lake was drained.
Mm-hmm. But now, talking about that creek being cold, we were told that there was some kind of a little structure in the creek, and that's where they put the milk and stuff to keep cold. It didn't have and boy, that'd keep it cold.
Yeah,
But
your lake
evidently,
had a lot of frogs down there too, didn't we, Clary?
I never liked frog legs that much.
What?
I like frog legs.
We used to go in there, and when we'd go in to get the milk, and there'd be frogs sitting on the ledges and stuff.
Oh.
It was just a cradle in the creek. And you'd bring the cans
Where's the
down.
headwater of the Sumas River? Where's the source, the headwater of the Sumas River?
The source is up in your country, up in Fulner country, at Licking. It's where you can see it coming down. Now they planted the blueberry field. They kept the train open, so that's where the original headwaters are.
okay, up that far. Because I've looked at that on a map, and it looks like it kind of get up around the Mac Road. It kind of peters out.
Actually, yeah.
And at the Mac
It
Road,
beyond Cayley's Pond, there's not a whole lot of the creek,
Okay.
but you can see it. You can see it across the river on the Hopewell Road pretty easily.
okay, but on the Mac Road, driving down that from the Nooksack Road down towards the Goodwin Road, going east, I guess. You come across, there's like a bridge, and there's a good-sized body of water on each side of the road, and that's part of that Sumas.
Yep.
And I've never been down there to it. I don't know how cold that water is, but that's a pretty good-sized body of water. I always wondered if that was maybe a spring coming up there. Or something.
The part on the
feeding
south,
that.
it's just a little deeper. That's all. The part on the south side was called Cayley's Pond, and that's where they used to skate in the winter.
Okay.
Put a barn fire alongside. At least that's what my mother tells me. I've never seen it frozen over except in '50. You remember frozen over? I don't remember it frozen over except in '50. Everything was frozen over in '50, even the river. Even the Nooksack River was frozen over in '50.
How are we doing for time here?
It's time.
It's up to you.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to just kind of do a quick deal on the barn. I showed you a picture of that barn. I kind of talked about it a little bit, but anyway, we're talking about materials on these old things and how that cedar was used. The barn is built out of fir, and this barn was built in 1915, which would have been like 4 years after the house. But the barn has got Douglas fir beams in it. It had a wood floor in it, which was torn out, and that was fir. But the siding, all this plank siding here, those are like barn boards, and they're made out of Douglas fir. I think it's Douglas fir anyway, but anyway, it's fir. And their boards are probably right around 7/8 of an inch thick, and they're up to 18 inches wide. You know, and they'd be for any place from 8 inches to 18 inches. And you'd think that would be a place for that cedar.
Yeah.
But it's all fir. So anyway, I don't know.
That was probably pretty well gone by 15.
Could have been.
Shingle mills probably had it pretty well eaten up
Okay.
by 15.
But it's amazing to just look at that wood, because like I say, I'm a wood person and I like wood, and all these old barn boards are virtually not free. So those came out of pretty good size logs. But anyway, I just thought that was
Probably
kind of interesting.
off the property too. They probably cut them right on the property. They might have sent it to the mill, but it probably was a tree.
Well, there was
probably was one tree on the property.
No, there was. I think there might have been more than that. Larry was over the other night and gave a picture off, and I don't think you'll be able to pick this up, but it was pictures of 1937 and 1938. There's a series of pictures of taking. I'll show that to you. Taking dug fir down.
Yeah,
and
that was the last one.
Yeah, and in this book, there's a picture in there that said Samuel Berg taking the last of the virgin timber down, and he's standing beside a log that's that's about that high. So they probably did have fir on the property. And if it's anything like that log,
It's right here.
yeah, they're sitting in the cut.
Yeah.
They're sitting in
I tell you a story on that one. I had to get married to get my original picture of that back. 'Cause I gave this girl I was dating, a lady I was dating, saw that in my thing, and she said, "That's my dad, and I don't have that picture." So out it came, and I just disappeared. Had to marry the woman to get the picture back. That's her dad, and that's her uncle, and that's my grandpa.
I take it was worth it. He's not
Very
going to
much
comment.
worth it.
Okay. Oh, golly.
She'd never seen that picture of her dad, so she wanted it.
I had a question about milling lumber. The picture of the men standing in front of their mill, did they go out and get the logs and mill them? Or did they have it brought in? Or
Yeah, they milled a lot of stuff. They have portable mills.
did
They-
but I mean, would they do the logging and then they do the finishing the lumber?
It was, in the early days, it was easier to move the mill than it was the logs. The logs were way too big for the equipment they had, so they'd move a mill into an area, and then they'd log all the way around the mill, and then they moved the mill on to that, to a new location and mill all that. And unless you had a place like the Tuxedo Mill where you had a creek that you could float it down, you could mill, then you could log all the way up the creek and float them down. But you're talking about 6-8 foot trees. You know, those are hard to move.
Yeah.
Well, did you have any, you probably,
I think you guys have covered it well.
Judy,
We didn't let you talk much, though, did we?
and I apologize for that. She's got some good stories, because when we first moved out here, Charlotte Berg lived right behind us and on the Berg Road fitting, and right behind the Mady's place. And anyway, the girls all got acquainted, and Judy and Charlotte and Libby and I think Marva Powell and I don't know, some of the other gals had a Bible study going, and it met at Charlotte's house. And so that was right off the bat. And so anyway, Judy and Charlotte became kind of pretty good friends there right off the bat. And I know that that was really a friendship that Judy had that she really valued.
Well, I would like to say that we have lived in a number of houses over our 50 years in Whatcom County, and several that were historical. And each time we would leave a house, I would go back in and do a walk through, get my mind, readjusted. But when you do that, it's the memories that you have, and it's the people that make it a home. All of a sudden, this home that you've enjoyed is a house.
Just a house.
It's a house. So to come out to Tuxedo, where my prayer was to find a historical, now see, I get very specific sometimes when I pray. Lord, I would like a historical house. I would like it to be a farmhouse, and I would like to have it be a Victorian Queen Anne style. Now that's asking for a lot, right?
With plumbing.
Indoor plumbing.
And not only were we blessed to find this house, but to find family, surrounded by family, Larry Mades and Jim Berg and Charlotte, to be right there, to come into the house and walk through and say, this is where my parents' bedroom was, this is where I did this as a child, this is, it just made it so personal and so just rewarding. And to hear the stories of the children, that generation, and then the next generation, the heart, be Jim and Larry's cousins, come through and hear Jim's stories, Larry's stories, the Christmas parties, the everything that they experienced in that home gave me a real connection to this family. And so I just hope that as we move on in life, the next family will enjoy it as much as we have.
I can tell you a story about that kitchen. Aunt Lolita used to call Mom up and say, Mom, and Gladys, why don't you come down and visit today? And she said, no, I'm not coming to visit today, because she knew that it was pear season and there would be probably 10 to 15 boxes of pears sitting in the kitchen and maybe 100 jars sitting there. And our Lolita's idea of me visiting was that we would can pears all day.
That's right.
And Mother didn't want to can any more pears. She'd can her own pears. Lolita canned 700 to 900 quarts a year.
Oh boy.
So she always had food for everybody. There was also another thing, is that if somebody came to church in the Methodist church in Nooksack, if they didn't go home with one of the Berg girls, there was something really wrong. Because they went home to dinner with some of the Berg girls.
Mm-hmm.
I went to college and took a biology course, and the lady that said, she knew me by Jimmy, because when she was a first year out of grad school in 1920, she taught at Nooksack, taught agriculture at Nooksack, and my mother was a senior then and took agriculture from her. And she was a single woman, so she spent all of her Sundays in the Berg house, eating dinner and associating with the Berg family. So she was, when my folks would come to the campus for Parents' Day, I'd lose my parents because they'd be up talking to Leona in her office. We were a very hospitable family, and something I'm very proud of.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we still are, aren't we, Larry?
How many people are related here this afternoon? How many people are related to each other?
In here?
Yeah.
Just Larry and I.
Anybody else?
No, my kids didn't make it today. But you can't go very many places around here without finding somebody's related to us.
Boy, that's for sure. And we like to say that we're newcomers because we've only been here for 50 years as far as Whatcom County. Because so many of our friends, they've started out here, and they've maybe gone to the military, but came back here and lived their lives, had their family, and their roots go all the way back. But anyway, so that makes us kind of, yes sir, John?
I just thought of something, I don't know if this makes me part of the family or not, but I met Phil, would be your dad, in Bellingham. We were going to church together, and then came out here one day, and we were out in the back of his house over here taking some barbed wire fence out or something, and he said, do you have family around here? And I said, nope. And he said, you do now. that make me related? I don't know.
Yeah, that's part of the family.
I think that's kind of where we come in, John.
I like what I'm hearing, and this
Yeah.
this is good.
I'll tell you, yeah, because when we came out here to, well, we knew a few people in Everson, but to be introduced and meet the family, well, we found firsthand some of that hospitality that Jim was talking about. And it's really been enjoyable. We just love it out here. And in fact, we talk about it now because at our house, we've got a lot of maintenance. I've got mowing to do and there's this to take care of and everything. And right now we're doing good, but there'll come a day when we've got to move along. And you know, right now, I can't imagine that. But it'll come and we'll have to prepare for it. And like Judy says, we hope somebody will come along and really enjoy that like we have.
Very true.
Okay.
I think that's a wrap, John.
All right.